In marketing, the ability for a user to authenticate information online has become a major global issue, which has led to the presentation that I'm going to present on today. See, the internet creates a direct path from content creators to consumers online, and this path has become a breeding ground for the spreading of misinformation online to persuade consumers to think one way or another. It's important that we define misinformation before we go too much further in this presentation. There are different types of definitions, so I'm going to define misinformation so we frame the remainder of this presentation correctly. So for purposes of this presentation and the analysis that we're going to do, misinformation simply means false information is shared but no harm is meant. So people are not intending to spread information in a harmful way. Now, there are two other types of spreading information online. It's called disinformation, which is when false information is knowingly shared to cause harm. Okay, we're not talking about that today. That's disinformation. And malinformation is when genuine information is shared to cause harm, often by moving information designed to stay private into the public sphere. So for purposes of our presentation, we're going to define misinformation as information that is shared but with no intent to do harm. My name is Christina Kalberg, and I'm presenting this presentation today for Anderson University and the ethics course in the Doctorate of Business Administration program. All right, so we now know what spreading of misinformation is. So why are we talking about it today? Well, online platforms such as Google and Facebook, they've become a major source of information online. However, there's a gap in research as to whether they have an ethical obligation to provide tools for users online to authenticate or identify misinformation. Current research suggests that developers of browsers, social media, as well as search engines are failing to meet the minimum corporate standards of responsibility when it comes to the issue of spreading misinformation. I'm going to get to that in just a minute as to why. So it begs the question, do platforms like Google and Facebook, that's all we're going to focus this presentation on today, do they have an ethical obligation to provide tools for users to authenticate or identify information online in an attempt to decrease the spread of misinformation? The issue is so pervasive that the World Economic Forum has actually identified it as one of the main threats to our society. So that's why we're talking about it today. There are a couple other reasons as to why we're talking about it today from a marketing perspective. First is content marketing is really kind of a new area. It's not necessarily new in terms of business. We've been talking about our businesses forever, but the way we do content marketing is different now. The way we do it is we provide value through any text, audio, or visual content that we publish online for a business. And we provide value in two ways. We either entertain through our content or we inform. Now, see, here's the part that becomes an issue. For businesses, they're trying to provide value through their content marketing efforts. If there's the spreading of misinformation out there and users have no ability to differentiate between what's true and false, that actually can detract from businesses' ability to build their brand, create value, as well as build trust with consumers online. Platforms such as Google and Facebook, they are a business tool, so they do impact business as a whole. That's why we're talking about it today. Marketers are always working to enhance brand trust of their consumers. And if consumers are unable to decipher which information is real or false about the brand, it has a negative impact. And we know that through the research that's already been conducted. Now, the next issue that's really important is market orientation theory, which says that businesses need to meet the needs of consumers. So how do we do that? Well, we have to have a focus on decreasing the spread of misinformation online. Why? Because consumers have told us that they want us to. They are having a hard time determining what's real and what's false, and it's not allowing them to make the best and most informed decisions. So consumers are telling us they want businesses to be able to identify, to give them the ability to identify information that's false versus information that's true online. So how can Google and Facebook participate in that process, since they are the ones that house the information on their platforms? Well, sadly, what's been going on so far is platforms like Google and Facebook, they're kind of hiding behind the Communications Decency Act of 1996 and Section 230, which protects the freedom of expression and innovation on the internet. Now, they're hiding behind it because they're trying to say that what people post online and on their particular platform is freedom of speech, and they don't want to restrict that. See, but we're not saying that we have to restrict the freedom of speech in order to help decrease the spread of misinformation online. See, Google and Facebook, they don't have to delete the information. That would be restricting freedom of speech. They can allow users to still post what it is that they're going to post. However, give all users the ability to identify whether that information is true or false. And then whatever that person believes is up to that person, right? And the decisions they make, that's up to them. See, the spreading of misinformation, it's been going on since the beginning of time. It's not going to change. But there are existing tools that companies like Google and Facebook have to help us as users identify whether the information is true or false. One of the technologies that exists today is what we call right-click authenticate. And it's just simply a way for users to identify misinformation. And let me explain how. This is actually what it looks like. So let's go through that. It provides an automated way for consumers to help review, rank, and identify misinformation based on 3 categories: textual, imagery, and video. See, we have the technology. There's also artificial intelligence, which I didn't get into very much. That's a whole other paper and presentation. But there is existing technology that companies like Google and Facebook can deploy right now to help users just simply identify what's true and what's false. You don't have to eliminate it. You don't have to restrict the freedom of speech. Just simply give tools to users to help with this problem. So in order to really answer our initial question, we have to do an ethical analysis. And Hosmer says that the ethical analysis, there's 3 primary areas. There's economic outcomes, legal requirements, and ethical duties that have to be analyzed. This is actually what the application of objective methods looks like. I'm going to go individually through each one of those 3 areas and relate it to the specific issue. So economic outcomes. As technology continues to rapidly advance and spread throughout the developing world, understanding misinformation is critical for developing countries to maintain momentum in productivity, which is a key indicator for economic growth and development. Right now, there's actually a gap in knowledge, so more research is needed to be done to fully understand how the spreading of misinformation actually affects economic outcomes for developing countries. What we do know is that research is needed to evaluate the full extent and connection between spreading misinformation online and social trust, social unrest, and economic growth. So we're going to continue to look at that. Now, legal requirements. Despite the issue of spreading misinformation being something that we talk about a lot, and it's actually gained a ton of attention, there really are no current clear policies for determining how to manage misinformation on the internet, what legal frameworks and ethical issues to consider, and to correct the issue from a public policy perspective. Most online platforms were not designed with public policy making in mind, and fixing the issue is proving to be very difficult, which is one main reason platforms such as Google and Facebook encourage users to share their personal interactions online and really haven't done anything to address the issue. All right, so ethical duties is the last one. Online platforms are often implicated in the spread of misinformation for encouraging the behavior of rapid sharing without adequate mechanisms for verifying the information. To counter this phenomenon, much related research in computer science has actually been done. And what they've developed are tools such as the right click authenticate button, Through this computer science research, they've actually developed these tools to detect misinformation, to rank fact-check worthy claims, and to understand their spread patterns. While other research has gone into psychosocial approaches, focusing on understanding information literacy, ideology, and partisanship. But for some reason, despite the availability of current tools to authenticate information, Google and Facebook, they've decided not to implement them. In response, researchers extended the scope of understanding this phenomenon and have suggested a values-based perspective for handling the spread of misinformation. So we'll see, to be determined. We don't know a lot about that right now, but we're going to hopefully have some more good information later. All right, but see, to fully answer the ethical question, it's not enough to only look at economic outcomes, legal requirements, and ethical duties. One must understand the different standards, recognize varying impacts, and define the moral problem. And Hosmer actually says the most basic question in ethics is, do you have an obligation to leave the world a little better than you found it? Or can you simply take what you want now and let other people worry about making up the shortfall later on? See, in my opinion, that's what Google and Facebook have done. They've actually answered Hosmer's question by allowing users to shoulder the responsibility to identify and determine what's true and what's false in terms of information posted online, rather than being proactive and participating with businesses to provide tools for users to authenticate information online. See, they've just simply said that they're going to allow users to actually shoulder the responsibility. They're going to let users they're taking from users what they want, which is they want people on their platform spreading information. They want that to happen. So they're continuing to allow that to happen without attempting to leave the world a little bit better by deploying these existing technology solutions that we already know will help decrease the spread of misinformation. So based on the ethical analysis presented by Hosmer, and after diving deeper into the different standards, varying impacts, and the moral problem at hand, my belief is that online platforms like Google and Facebook do have an ethical obligation to provide ways for users to authenticate information online in an attempt to help decrease the spread of misinformation. See, Google and Facebook really should shoulder some of the responsibility regarding this major issue at hand. And they need to deploy the tools that we know and have available to us today will work. Providing tools on each platform, it doesn't infringe on our freedom of speech, nor will it completely stop the spread of misinformation. That's really key to understand. But it is a tangible way for Google and Facebook to address the ethical dilemma and help leave this world a little better than they found it. What exists currently today is simply not enough. The problem will always remain. People will always continue to spread misinformation, oftentimes not intending to do harm. Eliminating the spread of misinformation online altogether is not the goal. Decreasing it is. Providing clear public policies and tools for users to participate in the process of authenticating information online may help and should further be explored by credible research efforts. Marketers need to continue to research the issue and develop policies and tools to help decrease the spread of misinformation. And that's what I have determined based on all of the literature reviewed, based on the current research that's available, and based on the ethical analysis that was conducted through Hosmer's tools. Here are my references. And in closing, I just want to say, spreading misinformation, it's been an issue since the beginning of time. Look at Satan in the Garden of Eden, right? He twisted God's words and got Eve to do what she shouldn't have done. So this is an issue that's been happening since the beginning of time. It's not going to go away. It is my opinion that it's an issue we need to continue to research and look at so that we can find better ways to help decrease the spread of misinformation online. Thank you.